When will that be? Just to give me an idea.
Maybe 5 minutes,
Thank
7
you.
minutes.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 331 of Humanity Rising. Today is the 4th of October. And in just less than a month from now, on the 1st of November, between the 1st and the 12th of November, there's going to be the Conference of Parties, what they refer to as the COP. It's COP 26. This is the 26th year that governments from around the world have met on an annual basis to try to understand and deal collectively with the accelerating crisis of climate change. This COP coming up is being called the most important conference of parties in history, because as you all are, I'm sure, are aware, in August, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released its sixth and latest report, in which it was saying we are now in unprecedented territory, which the UN Secretary General says means code red for humanity. We're now in the tipping point. We're no longer at the edge of the precipice. We're going over the precipice because our climate is nearing 2 degrees centigrade over pre-industrial levels, and we've passed 400 parts per million of CO2 into the atmosphere. Humanity Rising has been featuring this reality. And out of the hundreds of organizations that have come together to support Humanity Rising since we started last spring as a response to the pandemic, we've generated what we're calling the Global Regeneration Corps. Because if we are in the climate tipping point, if we're now going over the precipice, if accelerating ecological turbulence is now no longer avoidable, but in fact inevitable, in the face of which our governments are going to be less and less capable of ensuring stability, then we as human beings, we as the progressive movement, we as conscious people worldwide need to come to terms with the reality that we are responsible for the response. Because I think we all have this sinking feeling in our stomachs that the governments aren't going to do anything. The corporations aren't going to do anything. So we, the people, have to come together in an understanding that regeneration of the human and planetary ecology is the only option left. This is the final mission for humanity, to regenerate the world in the face of escalating climate turbulence. So that's what we're going to be talking about over the next 25, 26 days. And then when we come into the COP between the 1st of November and the 12th of November, on Humanity Rising, we're going to be convening a global regeneration summit. And we're going to be working with people that are going to be in Glasgow at the conference, who are credentialed participants at that conference of parties. And so for the 12 days of the COP, Humanity Rising will be broadcasting for those 12 days. And every day we're going to hear what the latest reports are from inside the conference center there in Glasgow. We're going to be featuring climate scientists and government officials and activists from all over the world, people who are prominent in the climate movement. We're going to be featuring groups that are coming together through the Global Regeneration Corps, what we're calling pods of regeneration first responders. We have nearly 150 groups in formation in 30 or 40 countries around the world. So this is a very critical period in human history. We're coming down to an extremely important conference where our governments have to grapple with Code Red. Humanity Rising with its partners inside the COP will be generating discussion, activity, and we're seeking to recruit as many people as we can to come into the Global Regeneration Core and to help build a global network of regeneration around the world at this critical moment. So that's going to be our meta theme over the next 6 weeks as we begin the month of October. And each day we'll be taking on various issues that have to do with this, certainly the pandemic, but the larger issues that are challenging the human race at this critical time. One of the issues that has come up over and over is the issue of grief. We're in the middle of a pandemic. The entire world has been subsumed by a virus that we can't even see into a meta formation of a critical challenge to our public health. Over this weekend in the United States alone, it was recorded that 700,000 people have died because of COVID-19. The US government under Donald Trump so squandered its responsibilities that the United States, even to the present day, 5% of the human population and has between 20 and 25% of all the COVID cases in the world and all the COVID deaths because of gross mismanagement by our government. President Biden has sought to ameliorate that, but the statistics haven't really changed much. And all over the world, whether it's China and India and Singapore and Australia and Vietnam and the Far East to Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, Costa Rica, North America, Europe, the Middle East, the world has been in grief as we've undergone this pandemic, out of which we have not emerged. And that's part of Code Red. This pandemic's not going to go away. That's what Code Red means. That the ecology now is becoming more and more turbulent, and there are going to be variants. And when I mentioned that our governments can no longer ensure stability, that also pertains to COVID. The vaccinations aren't working like they were supposed to. Now we have to have boosters. And now there are variants that aren't susceptible to the vaccination. But what do we do then? Part of what we do is we grieve. We grieve at a humanity that has wantonly, intentionally squandered its birthright on this planet. In the last 50 years, we've wiped out 69% of all the biodiversity on this planet, the animals, the birds, the fish, the forests, the insects. Species after species going extinct because of human activity. And we grieve. So this session today is going to be on grief and the transformation of grief in personal terms, in collective terms. And to do that, I'm going to turn it over now to Nadia Mujadi, who will also lead us in an opening, a very special meditation for today. You've seen Nadia several times before. She's assembled a number of panels, as many of you have on Humanity Rising. She's an environmentalist. She teaches science to children. She's very active in the transition movement and 350.org. And she's a tireless campaigner, as many of you I know are that have come into the Humanity Rising family. So Nadia, welcome once again on Humanity Rising, and I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Welcome, everybody. Thanks very much. I'm pleased to be here. As Jim said, my name is Nadia, and I'm from Scotland and Morocco, and I live in France at the moment. So I want to thank Humanity Rising for giving me this opportunity to bring this panel together. And thanks to Jim, and thanks to Richard Buckley, and thanks to Azim, Khamisa, and to Scarlett Lewis for being with us here today. And also to Pam Brown, who's in the background, and to Matt Robertson. So as usual, we're going to do a heart coherence today. And today I just want to honor all of our departed loved ones and thank them for the blessings that they bestowed on our lives. And also I want to send compassion to anybody grieving at this time. If we're grieving for humans, for the natural world, for Pachamama, for the loss of biodiversity, for animals. And also I want to express gratitude for this life and thank Pachamama for everybody's life, all of our lives. So Richard, if you could put the song on. Thanks.
That face that is usually covered by her phone has finally made an appearance. That face wouldn't be
So I just want to say thank you for that song. In 2016, my daughter, who's Lucille, she died of epilepsy. And songs like that one, and there's another one called Lakota Healing Song. I used to play them, and it helped my family and I in our grieving process. Around the same time, I came across the work of Scarlett Lewis, and the work of Azim Khamisa. And at that time, I was saying to my family, you know, I want to make my way through this grief process and get to post-traumatic growth. So when I came across the work of Azim Khamisa and Scarlett Lewis, I was just really hugely inspired by their stories and by what they've done, because these people have gone through a grief process, and now they're doing a movement for positive change in the world. So today I've got some questions, and we're going to speak to Azim Khamisa and we're going to speak to Scarlett Lewis, and I'm really pleased they're here with us. Before we speak to Azim Khamisa, we're going to put a 3-minute video in which explains the story. Could you put that on, please, Richard? Thanks.
Making a Difference report, and the story of a man whose capacity for forgiveness is astonishing. He suffered the worst loss a parent can ever face, and yet he decided to turn his grief into something positive for himself and a troubled young man. Here's NBC's John Larson.
A documentary began the story like this.
14-year-old Tony Hicks shot and killed 20-year-old Tariq Khamisa.
A 14-year-old murders a promising young college student for the cost of a pizza and becomes the youngest child in California history charged as an adult with murder and gets life in prison.
It was like a nuclear bomb going off in my heart.
Azim Khamisa, the father of the victim, buried his only son Tariq according to their Muslim custom. He climbed down into the muddy grave. It had been raining, and they lowered his son's body wrapped in a white cloth down into his open arms.
Yeah, I didn't want to leave him there alone. I stayed there a long time. When something bad happens, you can stop that bad from happening to other people.
But when he finally came up, he did something remarkable.
It is wrong to lie, to cheat.
First, he forgave the family of the killer.
It was a defining moment in my life.
Only through that forgiveness,
which in turn helped Azim start the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, speaking together to more than 1 million children about the real pain of violence.
And sometimes it scars the soul forever.
Then, Azim visited Tony Hicks, the killer, who had never had a father, and forgave him too.
His forgiveness wasn't something I expected.
Now Azim is lobbying to have Tony released from prison early, like he was his own son. And when he gets out of prison, what do you hope for him?
We'll have a job for him at the foundation.
So you're going to hire him?
Absolutely.
This is the killer of your son?
Yes.
Tony says now he knows what a real father is.
I had a man forgive me for taking the life of his son.
And he will work for that father, and for many who maybe never had fathers, someday, whether he gets out early or not. John Larson, NBC News, San Diego, California.
Hi, Azim. I just want to say thank you very much for being here. Welcome.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, and good evening to you in France.
Yes, and thanks very much to Scarlett. Welcome for being here too. Azim's got to leave a little bit early, so we're going to start with him for the questions. So I just wanted to know, what are you doing now? What have you been doing since that video?
Well, that video, as you noticed, was a while ago. I'm happy to say Tony, who took my son's life, is now 40 years old. I've been trying to get him out of prison for many years. He was finally released 2 years ago, and is now volunteering alongside his grandfather and me. The grandfather and I have been volunteering for the last 26 years. And with the grace of the universe, the foundation continues to grow every year. We are based in San Diego, and we essentially have a safe school model program. We specialize from 5th to 10th grade. Tony joined the gang in 6th grade and killed my son in 8th grade. So as I'm sure most of you know, Those adolescence years are very, very difficult. And our mission essentially is to stop kids from killing kids by breaking the cycle of youth violence. And we essentially have three mandates. First is to save lives of children because, as you all know, we lose so many on a daily basis. Our second is to empower the right choices so they don't fall to the crack and end up in lives of gangs and crimes and drugs and alcohol and weapons. And our third mandate is to teach the principles of nonviolence, of accountability, of empathy, of compassion, of forgiveness, of peacemaking and peace building. We have 4 programs that make up the Safe School model. We have a live assembly, which was usually me and the grandfather. Now it's me and Tony, or sometimes my daughter and Tony, who my daughter is executive director of her brother's foundation. And we essentially each tell our story. And then we have restorative practices curriculum. We have 3 different levels. The first one is for 5th and 6th graders. The second is for 7th and 8th graders. And the third one is for 9th and 10th graders. So there's age and grade specific, where we teach accountability and empathy and compassion and forgiveness and community activism and peace building and peacemaking, and how to become leaders, nonviolent leaders that are committed to creating peace in themselves, in their schools, in their community, and hopefully much broader into the world. And then we have a leadership program called the Peace Club. So we create a Peace Club on our campuses. And all of those 3 programs go to the entire school. And we have a 4th program, which is a mentoring program. And those go to the kids that are on a slippery slope, much like Tony was, which in inner cities in America, that number is quite high. It's someplace between 8 and 12%. So when you put all the 4 programs together, we are creating amazing results. We're cutting, besides teaching these important soft values, we're cutting expulsions and suspensions by 70%. And as you know, if you expel or suspend a kid, they typically will get involved with gangs and crime. We have now a 2nd site in Pennsylvania, and we just opened a 3rd site in Colorado in May. And we are busy going online. And by the end of this year, we will fully be online. We actually already have some of our programs online. We just trained a group of students that are in the Balkans, in Macedonia, Bulgaria, Kosovo, and Albania. So we're probably doing some international work as well. We've also created a program in partnership with Berkeley University for parents, because the pandemic has created a lot of problems for parents, and also based on our restorative practices. And we also have a program for teachers, because obviously, besides parents, teachers are very important in the life of our children. So all of these 6 programs now are not only creating, we've been tested by most all the universities. We have some very good high learning institutes in San Diego, where we are based. They are tested, they're proven, and besides all of that, they're affordable. So our goal now, obviously, is to get the program to as many schools as we can, first within our country, as well as in the world. So it's become a big part. As you saw in the video, the genesis of my story is very tragic. But sometimes I think in deep trauma, there is a spark of clarity. And every saint has suffered the dark night of the soul. And I know that that's true of Scarlett, and that's true of my story. And sometimes that spark of clarity for me was that I saw that there were victims at both ends of the gun. It was random, it was senseless, that I saw that the enemy wasn't Tony, he was 14 years old, that the real enemy was the societal peer pressures that forced many young men and women. Tony joined a gang at the age of 11 to, fall through the crack and then get involved with gangs and crimes and drugs and alcohol. And we lose a child pretty much every 2 years. I still weep when I think about Sandy Hook. 20 first graders, were gunned down in automatic fire in the richest nation in the world. I mean, how did we get here? So I started with a very simple premise that violence is a learned behavior. No child was born violent. Tony wasn't born violent. And if you accept that as a truism, then nonviolence can also be a learned behavior. So that's my work. And I also, besides the foundation, speak worldwide on forgiveness. I do a 4-day, used to be a 2-day in-person workshop on how do you forgive people that have harmed you and how do you forgive yourselves. Now it has morphed into a 4-day, 4 hours a day workshop, which is online. I'm going to be doing one at the end of this month, trying to promote forgiveness and get more people to forgive, because I believe that that is the portal to peace. I've written 5 books. My first book was From Murder to Forgiveness, Forgiveness to Fulfillment, because the work I've done has been very fulfilling, and then fulfillment to peace. And Tony actually wrote the foreword to it. So it's a 26-year journey that started very dark, but I am at peace today to a level I never had before. And I teach this because I believe that if more people can get to forgiveness, hopefully we create more peace in the world. So that's part of my ministry as well. And with the pandemic, most everything has gone online. But prior to that, I was speaking around the world and promoting forgiveness. I'll stop there.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. And it was making me think, around the time after my daughter died, I actually printed out the Choose Love formula. They have a program for schools, and I printed out the age for my daughter and for my son, and I did the program with them, the Choose Love formula. And then it came out as a home version. There's a home program version. So I redid it with my son again. And I know that in schools in the States, they spread across the States. There was teachers going and downloading the program. They must do the same with you. They're literally lowering, violence in schools by teaching children how to deal with their emotions. I think like if I'd been able to learn that when I was small, it would have helped me a lot with my life, And the other thing is I noticed that self-care seems to be a very important thing. So I actually wanted to ask you, how did you turn this great pain into love? Is it like a transfer of energy, to do something so amazing with this kind of grief, and I want to know, like, how do you stay healthy holistically? Because I know with Scarlett as well, that's, she's got like a self-care practice, and, I wanted to know, how, do you have a practice that you've done over the years, to stay healthy that's also helped you pass through this process,
Yeah. Well, the process is, in my case, I remember I keep an active journal, and in my first journal entry after Tariq died was, and my condolences to you, Nadia, for your loss, and Scarlett as well. That there's nothing quite so painful as a broken heart. And I think you recognize that, and Scarlett recognizes that. There's nothing quite so painful as a broken heart, but a broken heart is an open heart. If one can learn to live with an open heart, gentle transformations begin to manifest. I remember giving a talk in Kalamazoo, Michigan to many parents like you and Scarlett and I had lost children. And I started with this quote, and at the end of the quote, a visiting scholar at the Fetzer Institute came to me and says, I was very moved by your opening quote, it reminded me of a quote by Rumi, since I practice as a Sufi. She says, and I'm sure you know this quote. And I said, well, Rumi wrote 140,000 quotes. I don't remember all of them. Please remind me what he said. And Rumi said, God will break your heart over and over and over and over and over and over again until it stays over. So the first part, I think, of the process is to make sure you have an open heart, because we live in a society where we judge a variety of isms. And you can't judge with an open heart. You have to close your heart. It's only with an open heart that you can receive and send love, compassion, empathy, forgiveness, all of the essential values that we must teach. And not only can you teach this, I think our children are hungry. I have over 150,000 letters. I've been given over 1,000 presentations live to students. So they're very hungry for this knowledge. In the process that I teach in my workshop is that first you have to go through a grieving period. In my Sufi tradition, we have a 40-day grieving period. This is the painful part. It's important to grieve. You're not supposed to cook or clean house. I had people from my congregation that brought food and helped me with all of the issues of living and prayed every hour. And I had to tell the story. And I couldn't even say Tariq died. It was like sending a 2,000 volt through my system. But looking back at it, grieving is medicine. There's a good adage from the Turkish tradition that he who conceals his grief does not find a remedy for it. Now, obviously, there's a healthy way to grieve and an unhealthy way to grieve. The healthy way is to pray, meditate, journal, spend time with nature, and share. I think it's important it really helped me share my grief. Swedish proverb, shared sorrow is half sorrow, shared happiness is double happiness. Therapy, I think that's a good idea. Obviously, the bad habits is to, rely on legal or illegal drugs. So 40 days was not enough for me. It took me a lot longer. But the point is it's important to then create a sunset on your grieving. Because in my tradition, I was told by my spiritual advisor that the 40-day ends the grieving, because the 40 days, the soul of the departed person, in case of me, Tariq's soul was in close proximity of family and loved ones. But after 40 days, the soul moves to a new consciousness in preparation of its forward journey. And grieving will impede his journey in the next world. We believe there's a life after death. Rather than grieving, good compassionate deeds done in the name of the departed are spiritual currency that provide high octane fuel for his journey in the next world. So that was something that came out of my tradition. And I thought, well, that's brilliant. We should teach this to our kids, that it's important to grieve, but then to transmute that grief into something positive, which was really the inspiration for me to create the foundation. Tariq's name is on the marquee, and every day we do good, compassionate deeds in his name. And my thought was, we'll create millions of dollars of spiritual currency so Tariq could finish his journey in the next world in a rocket. That was meaningful because that brought energy back to him, and it still does, especially when I'm talking to kids. I speak with my son. So that's the first step. The second step is to give up all the resulting resentment. That's hard to do, but once you go to the grieving period, then you understand that forgiveness is something you do for yourself. You have to separate yourself from the offender. I truly believe karma always balances. There's no escaping wrongdoing. If you stay in anger and resentment and hatred, who are you hurting? Yourself. You might as well take a whip and beat yourself. It's self-abuse. So forgiveness is something you do for yourself. Leave the offender to the higher power. Even all the scriptures tell us to do that. The judgment is his, not ours. And judgment, I believe, is the biggest impediment to forgiveness. So give up all the resulting resentment. I teach that in my workshop. You do that through creating empathy and setting an intention through meditation. I meditate 2.5 hours a day. And if those of you are interested, it's on my website. If you scroll down, I have a preamble on my methodology and then 2 guided meditations. One is on forgiveness. The other one is on manifesting your life's mission. And the last part of this forgiving others is to reach out. Reach out with love and compassion to the offender. That was very useful to me when I finally met Tony when he was 19. So I've known him now 21 years. Sometimes we don't have to reach out to the person who murdered our child. Very often, issues are mother, daughter, I get a lot of that, father, son, business partners. I do this work also in corporations of how, and management teams, of how you take conflict and create unity. So the reach out is important because I think we have to have that kind of empathy because we are all fallible as human beings. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. So that reaching out and trying to create some kind of a resolution is very important. At least that has been my story. So those are the 3 steps that helped me get to where I am today and also what I teach in my workshops.
Well, thank you very much for that. Yeah. Forgiveness is also in the Choose Love formula. So, it's a very important part. And I wanted to ask you, what kind of changes have you seen from your work? Like examples of, what things have made you really happy and really inspired when you've seen how, positive results?
Yeah, there are many stories. I'll share a couple of them. One is with a young person and one is with an adult. I just gave a talk at a bishop's school, which is a very high-end private school in La Jolla, where I live, very expensive. And after I spoke to about 800 students and 200 faculty, a young lady came up to me and said that I met you 10 years ago when I was in 7th grade. I was put in foster care since age 8. And your story about forgiveness helped me not only forgive my biological parents and all the foster parent homes that I've lived in that created grief and confusion in my life. And as a 11-year-old, I decided to take steps and move my own future ahead. She won scholarship to Bishop. Obviously, she couldn't afford to go to that school. And has just recently graduated. When I met her again for the second time, she was a senior and has a full scholarship at UCLA. One encounter, and you think it changed her life. And she reminds me of Kamala Harris. I wouldn't be surprised if she now gets going forward and, totally revamps the foster care system because it needs that, because our foster care system is totally broken. The second example was in a workshop. I had a Jewish lady, when this was an in-person workshop. Back then it was a 2-day workshop. On the morning of the second day, she came up to me and says, Azim, you don't get it. She's very animated. I said, what is it I don't get? I'm working on forgiving Hitler. Pretty heavy, because her family was murdered in the Holocaust, which is a huge blemish in our history, probably one of the worst blemishes in our history. And you could see the anger in her face, the hatred in her face. Her entire face was etched with this hatred, And I told her, I said, how's that working for you? Let me tell you, the higher power knows how to deal with Hitler better than you do or I do. And let me tell you, as you and I speak, a higher power is dealing with Hitler. How's this working for you? Why do you want to have Hitler occupy this meager real estate of your psyche? Why don't you let it go, knowing the higher power is dealing with it, so love and joy can live here? And the light bulb went on. And even by the end of the second day, you could see a different aura in her, and the lines of hatred and anger starting to fade. A month later, I got this beautiful card from her. I get a lot of letters and cards, both from kids and adults. A beautiful card that she took a lot of time in putting it together, and there was thanking me for helping her get rid of Hitler. And there was a PS, my husband thanks you. We've been married for 35 years, and now we have the most loving relationships because Hitler does not live here anymore. So I think this is important to see that forgiveness is a gift that you give yourself, knowing there's no way you escape wrongdoing. Leave that to the higher power.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so my last question is, what wisdom would you give to somebody, you know, if there's somebody who's in the middle of you know, the sort of extreme sorrow that they are when you're in grief, what advice would you give them to regain la joie de vivre, you know, la joie de vivre, you know, to rejoin to life, you know, what advice would you give?
Well, we are all going to get hard hits. It's part of life. And I think you have to reframe that. One of my books is called The Secrets of the Bulletproof Spirit, How to Bounce Back from Life's Hardest Hits, which was published by Random House in 2009. There are 30 chapters in this book of basically helping you actually get through what you just asked me. But I think the big thing is you have to reframe. I mean, I've been very fortunate having done this work the last 26 years. I've met many, many luminaries. I met His Holiness the Dalai Lama 6 times. And one of the lessons he gave me, I think, answers this question very well. That in the Buddhist philosophy, he says that everything that happens to you, you attract because it is part of your spiritual evolution. And sometimes the universe hits you pretty hard, as it did me, and it did you, Nadia, and it did Scarlett. But the universe sometimes gives you those hard hits to put you on your spiritual purpose. We all have a spiritual purpose. I feel now my son's gift to me is put me on my spiritual purpose, much like your work or Scarlett's work. So I had a hard time when the Dalai Lama told me. I said, well, did I attract the murder of my son? Nobody would ever do that. And his answer to that was, Azim, before you were born and your son was born, you had a contract. Because we believe in our Buddhist tradition that we have lessons to learn in every lifetime, that he would come to you and he would die very tragically like he did. Because God gave us free will. And you had to still choose between revenge and forgiveness. Because part of your lesson in this lifetime was forgiveness, and your son came to you to give you that choice. And you made the right choice. So in your next lifetime, you do not have to lose another son. Spiritually evolved, I agree, but that was meaningful to me. So I think one of the biggest thing is you don't ask why me if you're going through a hard hit. It's part of life. You're not going to play football and not get tackled. You're going to get hard hits. We have to reframe it. So you don't ask why me. You ask, as the Dalai Lama taught me, why did I attract this to me? And when you ask that question, you get different answers. And to see that in this, every cloud is a silver lining, in this hard hit, is there a message to help you evolve, maybe put you on your mission, much like it has me, and I see it has Scarlett and you. And once you are on your spiritual purpose, I always say, the wind is always on your back and the road rises to meet you. So there are gifts in these hard hits, and that reframing is key to be able to get through a hard hit.
Yeah, well, I wanted to point out, because I know that also you're on the vice chair of the Noetics Institute.
Yes.
And I've been following their work quite a lot. And what I find really interesting in their work is the connection between spirituality globally, and science. So it's like they're coming together now. So I just wanted to also ask you, how do you connect to your inner guidance?
Yes, so the Institute of Noetic Sciences is 47 years old. It was started by Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth man to walk on the moon. And we teach consciousness. We explore and research consciousness. And we talk about inner guidance. And meditation is the way I do it. My meditation practice is 2 hours a day, at 3 different times a day. The details are on my website. I meditate before I go to sleep. And then I meditate from 4 to 5, which in my Sufi tradition is the bewitching hour. The world is very quiet. And then I go back to sleep, and then I meditate again when I get up at 7, 6:30 or 7. And I do different things at these 3 different times. And you can study that on my website. But the main part is, if you meditate only once a day, a lot of people don't want to get up at 4. I would still recommend you meditate at least twice a day, because the results are 10 times higher. And at night, I basically empty my mind. I look at my mind as a basket of apple. Each apple is a thought, and I empty it. And then when I meditate between 4 and 5, I haven't added anything, and I'm more able to download my inner guidance, because meditation is listening. It's a download. Prayer is an upload. And you throw in the question before you go to sleep, and you be very still, be very quiet. Sometimes you get your answer in your meditation from your inner guidance with a little voice. Sometimes you might see a number plate, or you might see somebody say a few words to you, or you might encounter a conversation, but that answer will come. But if you stay with it, I've been meditating now for 50 years. So, I rely very much on my inner guidance, because what I've learned in life, you're going to get problems or intellect will not solve, even if you have a double PhD. Even Einstein says we must take care not to make intellect our God. Sure, it is powerful muscles, but no personality. It cannot lead, it can only serve. In life, you're going to get problems your hearts are not going to be able to heal. Then where are you? But there are no problems, and let me underscore that, no problems you're going to get in your life that your spirit cannot solve or heal. And I think all of us are a good example of that. So the idea is that I now lead from the spirit, because, I went to some, I worked in international finance when my son was alive. I went to some good schools in England in math and finance, but they were useless. What helped me deal with Tariq's tragedy was my spiritual foundation. So today I lead from my spirit, and I rely very much heavily on my meditation practice and tap into my inner guidance.
Thank you very much. So we know where to get you. We can get you on the Tariq Khamisa Foundation. And I wanted to say thanks so much again for coming. I also have been I do Qigong, I do prayer, I do meditation. I start every morning, both me and my husband, we do a little prayer, to Mother Earth with our glass of water. And I was brought up, my mum was a Scottish Protestant with my granny. They used to go to church every day. And on the Moroccan side, they were all Muslim. So my grandparents, it's been around me, I've seen the 2 religions. But of course, I was Generation University in Scotland, I wasn't religious, should I say. I didn't consider myself religious, and the spirituality was there, you know, with all the teachings I'd had from different cultures. So now I know that Scarlett as well. She does EFT. I think. Well, I'd like to invite her in now so we can get her into the conversation as well. But I agree with you when you say that your meditation is really fundamental. I find for me as well the qigong and the bits of meditation, whether it's EFT and prayer, these things are essential. They're like, I have to do them daily. You know, it's like reconnecting with Mother Nature. And going outside as well, that's just so simple, but it works every time for everybody because, you know, we are there. So anyway, I'd like to invite Scarlett in now, please.
Okay, I'm going to just say goodbye to everybody and thank you for having me on this program and all the best. I know you have a lot more coming over. I unfortunately have to jump off, but I'll stay a little bit and listen to Scarlett, and then I'm going to jump off. Again, thank you very much, and namaste.
Thanks so much to you. Thank you.
I'm here. I just can't start my video. If someone would give me, thank you.
Hi, Scarlett. Pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And I just am glad that Azim is going to stay on long enough for me to thank him and to let him know that I agree with everything that he said. What a gift that his modeling is to the world.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for being here. And yeah, I've just got the same questions I wanted to ask. Well, what have you been doing? I mean, I see you've got the Choose Love formula behind you there. I've had that on my wall in the house, and we still look to it. We still look to all the different parts, you know, and we do the brave breaths sometimes, courage breaths. You know, I think it's amazing what you've been doing. So yes, if you could tell us about it.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here and to share the message that I received and mostly what I've learned. When I came back to my house after Jesse's murder, I found that he had written 3 words on our kitchen chalkboard. They were nurturing, healing, love, phonetically spelled because he was in 1st grade and just learning how to write. But I knew from that message that if the shooter, who was a former student of Sandy Hook Elementary School, who had come back to perpetrate the crime, if he had been able, if he had had the essential life skills that would enable him to give and receive nurturing, healing love, the tragedy would never have happened. It was so simple, but simple isn't always easy. I knew that it would be my life's mission to spread that message of nurturing, healing love. It was a message of comfort for his family and friends, but it was also marching orders because I knew that that was where we needed to turn in order to survive and thrive as a society. So I started doing research and I wanted to look at the issues that we're experiencing in our world in a different way, because I think everybody on here will agree with me that what we're doing now isn't working. And, you know, we like to blame others and fault find and point fingers at other people. And I saw that especially after the tragedy in Sandy Hook. I saw so many people blaming Adam Lanza and his mother who gave him access to her guns. However, for me, it wasn't that simple, because if it really was all Adam Lanza's fault, and Azim had said something similar when he was speaking, if it was really all Adam Lanza's fault, then school shootings would have never happened before him, and they would never happen afterwards, except in the United States. This is our normal. We have 1 school shooting a week. And I can't even say it's our new normal anymore. It's just our normal thing. And the amazing thing is 100% of these can be prevented. And so I got to work to not focusing on the problem, which is how we're wired to think. Actually, we're wired to focus on the negative, to be reactive. but to focus on the cause of the problem. And only then can we be talking about a solution. And so that's what I set out to do. And I took that message of nurturing, healing, love as my guidepost, and had doctoral professors research those three words and found that they are in the definition of compassion across all cultures. And when we broke down the meaning of each of those words, it comprised a powerful and profound formula for thoughtfully responding in love. So this formula can literally lead you to thoughtfully responding with whatever is going on in your life, whatever has happened before in your life, by helping you take your personal power back, take personal responsibility, for where you are and where you're going by choosing love. And this formula is right behind me. It starts with courage. Courage is the most important character value because it's the one that underlies all the rest. It's going to take so much courage for people to take responsibility for where we are in the world right now and where we're going, instead of blaming, finger pointing, fault finding, giving responsibility to somebody else. And we know now that there is nobody else that's going to swoop in and fix everything. It's going to be us. And I can't talk about courage without talking about Jesse's courage. Jesse literally stood up to this shooter who came into his first grade classroom, who had just murdered his principal and guidance counselor right outside his door. He came into Jesse's first grade classroom, murdered his teacher who was standing just behind him, and then his gun ran out of bullets. And it was during the short delay that Jesse called to his classmates to run. 9 of them were able to escape with their lives, and Jesse is credited with saving those lives. And it is that courage that we all have. We all have the capacity for Jesse's courage. Science tells us that courage is like a muscle. We can practice it and strengthen it. And that is the first character value that we teach in the Choose Love movement's no-cost programming. It's next generation lifespan. So we teach it for all ages. And the first thing that we teach is courage, because it takes courage to face the difficulty in your life, including grief, and realize that you can learn from it, that you can grow through it, and you can actually be strengthened by it. That takes tremendous courage. And you reference the brave breath. That's one way to practice your courage. But just to know that we all have the capacity for courage that Jesse showed, the courage to be kind when people aren't being kind to us, the courage to do the right thing, to tell the truth, to face difficulty, roadblocks, challenges, even fear, instead of resisting and avoiding or even numbing ourselves. And then nurturing means loving kindness and gratitude, practicing gratitude. It's amazing that the majority of thoughts that we have every day, because of our innate negative bias, our brains just want to keep us safe. That's their number one goal. And so we have this negative bias that has us focusing on the negative. The majority of our thoughts that we have every day are negative and repetitive. And it makes up the way that we view our world. It makes up how we deal with issues. The majority of our research is focused on the problems and how they harm us. But in reality, we can only focus on one thought at a time, which is pretty amazing since we have tens of thousands of thoughts every day. So we use gratitude to shift the focus of our lens from negativity, anger, frustration, resentment, lower energy thoughts to grateful thoughts. And that literally neuroscientifically strengthens us to consider healing. Nurturing, healing. Healing literally means forgiveness. And that was spoken of so much previously. And it is the key to healing, actually, forgiveness. And so forgiveness is a big part of what we teach in the Choose Love movement. But I remember creating this programming and having so much pushback by the other adults that were helping me create this, saying, wait a minute, you can't teach kids how to forgive. It's way too lofty a topic. But here's the amazing thing. And Azim had talked about this as well. Kids love forgiveness. Kids get it. They can learn it, and they practice it all the time. And when I ask them why, they say it's because it's like a superpower. This is what they say. It feels so good to forgive. And I chose to forgive Adam. First of all, like Azim, I realized that hurt people, and that he wasn't born a mass murderer. And Azim said the same thing about his son's murderer. He was cultivated into what he became. And so therefore, I had to take some responsibility in that. And I felt compassion for him. He had cried out for help multiple times. He had needs that we knew that weren't met. He was bullied. He was isolated. He was most likely abused, and he wasn't given the help that he needed. He slipped through the cracks. And this is what happens. And there's so many out there that are just like Adam Lanza that we can still save. So I felt compassion for him. And the other thing is, I was not going to be another victim of the Sandy Hook tragedy. I had a 12-year-old son, Jesse's older brother, and I knew that I had to model for JT what healthy grieving looked like, what choosing love looked like. And I knew that this included forgiveness. I wanted to find joy in my life. I wanted to live life like Jesse actually wanted when he left his brother a note that JT found shortly after the shooting. He wrote, "Have a lot of fun." This was the last message that Jesse wrote to his 12-year-old brother, and JT found it after Jesse's murder. And I wanted to honor Jesse in that as well. I wanted JT and I to have a lot of fun going forward in our lives, but I realized that I could not do this without choosing to forgive. You know, we normally think that forgiveness is something, it's a gift that we give the person who hurt us, who doesn't deserve it. Because they are not sorry, they don't care, they may not even know that they hurt us, when in reality, the decades of research behind forgiveness prove that it is a gift that we give ourselves. And my new and improved definition is taking your personal power back. And sometimes it's the only way that we can do this is by forgiveness. And then love, in Jesse's message of nurturing, healing, love is compassion in action. It is having the courage to step outside of your own busyness and distraction, even pain and suffering, to identify the need of another and then actively do something to help ease that pain. So when we've had the courage to choose gratitude rather than anger, hatred, and resentment, when we have the courage to choose forgiveness, when we have the courage to be able to step outside of our own pain and suffering to help somebody else, we've chosen love. This formula can literally lead us to thoughtfully responding with love. It's what I use every day, all day long. This is the basis of all of our programming. The fact that we can't always choose what happens to us in life. I would never have chosen to have my son murdered. Collectively, we would never have chosen to have our climate the way that it is today. And we would never have chosen, of course, a global ongoing pandemic. However, we can take our personal power back in how we choose to respond. And when we choose love, we are literally helping to create a safer, more peaceful and loving world. There is also a global super pandemic of anxiety and worry and fear. And we can take the opposite of anxiety is action. And the action that we can take is choosing love in our response.
Oh, you can hear me now. Thanks very much, Scarlett. It actually reminds me of last week on Humanity Rising. They had these people from Peru, the Quero from the high Andes, and they were talking about how, just when you a state of energy where you give love, and they were saying it's not just the normal give love like I love you. It's actually being love and going and being love. And when I look, it makes me think of that, because your work, that's what you're doing. You're actually going into schools. You're teaching people how to actually vibrate love as an actual electromagnetic current. So, and another thing that I heard, which was interesting, was from this man called Hans Andweg. And he says, like, in the Middle Ages, people didn't have showers. And we used to think, like they, how is it that they didn't have showers? How did they manage, we do personal hygiene, we do showers. And but the thing is, we have an energy body as well. So there's a thing called an energetic shower. Like how you get rid of all that stress of the day, how you clear all this. And as you were explaining earlier, gratitude, there's the neuroscience, how that works, forgiveness, compassion, courage. But my next question is, how did you actually turn the bouts of pain, the waves of grief, that come into this love? And I suppose it goes with the next question is, how do you keep holistically healthy? What do you do daily self-care to keep you, to get rid of tension, to get rid of, your feelings, and, to manage them?
Those are both really great questions. I mean, my pain was my motivation to serve. And I realized my service to humanity was my healing. That was something that I didn't know before the tragedy. And I can tell you that I wouldn't be here unless my son was murdered. But what I have learned and how I have grown through that pain, and then the ability to use everything that I've learned to help humanity, help our children, help our parents, help our communities, is a huge part of my healing. And I think that just that awareness is so helpful in healing grief, is taking that pain and using it as motivation to help others. And I do practice self-care for sure. A big part of my healing is my work in the Choose Love movement. That's a huge part of my healing. But also I live on a farm, and it's where I chose to raise my boys. And so we have animals. I've always loved animals. I've loved being outside, getting my fingernails dirty, being active. I love the water. So I love being out on the water, and I do that. We have a lake right down the street from where I live, and I am out on the water as much as possible. I'm listening to the sounds of nature. I'm walking, so I'm exercising my body. And I constantly tell my body how much I love it. I grew up as some, young girls with the social media era, looking at myself and comparing myself to others and hating myself. And now I realize, oh my goodness, my body has led me through. It continues to stand through so much. It's been my most loyal love and supporter and guidance system. And I tell it that I love it so much. So I connect to my body through my heart and my mind. I pray. I have a great faith, and I, like Azim, know that I will be reunited with Jesse. And I believe that we are working on this mission together. I believe that Jesse helps coordinate things for me, because what Choose Love movement has been able to accomplish, we're in 10,000 schools across the United States. In every state, we're in 112 countries. We now have communities that are choosing love. I know that that is all guided by Jesse and his message, and he puts things together for me. All I have to do is live in gratitude and show up and be present. And so I'm so thankful for that. I do practice gratitude and prayer every day. In fact, I pray every day, all day long, and stay in constant contact with Jesse, who's also with me and helping.
Yeah. Well, I noticed it's really important what you were saying about self-love, like loving yourself, and it's the same with forgiveness to oneself first. That again reminds me of the people from Peru, because like if love's an electromagnetic vibration, you've got to be healthy on the inside. You love yourself, you forgive yourself, so that you're able to take this out and be of service to the world and be of service to the planet. And it's so easy to do it as well, because you can just saying thank you to Pachamama. If you look out the window, there's always a sky to say thank you to, and like you said, getting out in nature. The last question I wanted to say is, what sort of changes have you been seeing then with the work that you've been doing for quite a few number of years now? What's some really happy examples that you've been seeing? Because I know you've been bringing down gun violence in the States, which is a huge thing, just by actually the way that children are being given tools to regulate their emotions from day to day, every day, So what's some positive? Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is when you were saying that you were guided by Jesse, that's a really important part for me, because Azim Khamisa is, as I said, he's the vice chair for the Noetics Institute, and the Noetics Institute is a scientific organization. The fact that Jesse left you those 3 words, nurturing, healing, love. He was 6. He wrote it in 6-year-old language. He also left a note for his brother. This is non-local information. They talk about non-local information in Heart Coherence. So for me, it's really an example of spirituality and science, almost showing us the way forward. Choosing love and choosing to vibrate with love. No matter what happens to you. I just wanted some examples of what things have made you really smile. I know there's a lot of things that have made you smile.
Every day, all day long, things come in that make me smile, that bring me joy. Absolutely. And yes, I mean, those things are unexplainable. How Jesse came across those words, the message to his older brother, and far more things than that. I remember putting together my book, Nurturing, Healing, Love, and we had to take out so many of those things because we would have written a book about this thick, and they continue to happen, which is absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, in America, gun violence is actually increasing. And I believe that's because of our focus on the negative, on the gun violence, rather than focusing on the cause of that gun violence, which is pain and suffering. Our program teaches how to choose love. And gives essential life skills that are needed in order to have healthy and meaningful relationships. We teach how to manage our emotions. We teach how to learn from, grow through, and be strengthened by difficulty. We give coping skills. We teach how to make responsible decisions. It's called social and emotional character development. And we teach post-traumatic growth, that the fact that most human beings, when they go through difficulty, actually learn from it and grow through it. That's the majority of us. And we teach how to do that, to take the pain that happens in your life and to use it to serve others. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. We're not born with these skills and tools. We have to learn them. And I believe that Azim said, people are taught to hate. And that's the truth. We're not born hating. We're actually born loving, but we're taught to hate. And if we can be taught to hate, we can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than the opposite. And that's a quote by Gandhi, and that's the truth. So we literally teach people how to choose love. And bottom line, the way to make this really simple is we teach people how to feel good, because we want to feel good as human beings. And a lot of times we reach for the easiest thing, which could be anger, because anger makes us feel like we have control, but it's a false sense of control. We reach for drugs because drugs numb us. But unfortunately, when we're numbed to the pain, we're also numbed to the joy. We join gangs. There are lots of ways to feel good, but really the true way, the best way, the most long-lasting way, the authentic way for human beings is to connect with one another. And connection is love, but we need to learn how to do that in a healthy and meaningful way. And that's what Choose Love teaches. So stories come into us every day about people that are learning how to choose love. We actually have a daily email called the Daily Dose of Love, because we were getting so much positive feedback that we wanted to share these examples from kids and educators and parents and communities across the world that are choosing love and learning how to choose love. By the way, I had to learn how to choose love. These social, emotional, character development, life skills have to be learned. And I realized when I started researching a different way to address the issues which continue to escalate in our society, what we're doing wasn't working. So I researched a different way to address the cause. And I realized very quickly that I didn't have these skills and tools, even though I'm a college graduate. And, I did a lot of jobs to help raise my kids as a single mom. I was not socially and emotionally intelligent. And I've learned these skills and tools as an adult. They're called essential life skills. And my life, despite the tragedy, is exponentially better. It's more joyful. It's more open. As Azim said, yes, my heart was broken open permanently. But because of that, I'm able to really understand the meaning of life, I believe, and live my life in service. And in doing that, all of the nurturing, healing love that you give, you get back. And by the way, that's also proven in science. So there is a beautiful connection between science and love, and that is an amazing thing.
Thank you very much, Scarlett. Yeah, so I was wondering if we want to bring Jim Garrison back in now, and if there's any questions from the chat. I don't know if he's been, if there's any questions from the chat from anybody. We know where to get you. It's on Chooselovemovement.org.
Chooselovemovement.org. We have lifespan programming. It is all no cost. So I suggest everyone go on and register. It is a movement. So we have been spread by word of mouth. So if you go on and you like what you see, please talk about it, share it on social media. We are responsible for the future of our world. And we need to step up to the plate. The opposite of anxiety is action. And there is something that we can do. And this is what we're doing now is the Chooselovemovement.org. We have comprehensive programming for schools, homes, and communities that's being taught now all over the world by word of mouth.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can personally recommend, and now there's the home program. So for families, for teachers, it's a really great program. We still refer back to, like I said. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Nadia. Thank you, Scarlett. What a powerful presentation. And I can't imagine as a parent myself, what it was like for you to so suddenly and so brutally experience the death of a very young being. So I just want to say I love you and your husband and your other son, and we just no parent should have to go through what you've been through. So I just want to acknowledge that part of it. You know, a question that I would have, I completely agree with you about the necessity of teaching love and forgiveness. You know, love and forgiveness are the two most powerful forces, I think, that are available to us human beings in this world. But there's another one that I would just, and I know you've thought a lot about it, and that is one of the reasons why the United States is the only country in the world that has this level of violence and mass murders and school killings, is because we're the only country in the world that allows free access to major weaponry. So I think that's a combination. If we could just get rid of the weapons that are available to these kids, you know, we would go a long way, as I'm sure you know better than any of us, to solving these kinds of totally anti-human behavior. Does your organization take a stand on that, or do you just focus more on the psycho-emotional issues involved in kind of responding?
You know, it's interesting, Jim, because after the tragedy, I saw this incredible polarization that happened in the United States. And I know that it had been going on, but I think it really solidified after Sandy Hook between the anti-gun and the pro-gun. And so there were lots of organizations that were doing the anti-gun, and I really didn't see, of course, that being very productive. My son had just been brutally assassinated, literally, alongside 19 of his first grade classmates and 6 educators in one of the worst mass shootings in US history. I didn't want to be just one more person to get on that train that hasn't been productive. Let's face it, violence is up 30% in the United States. Last year, I think about all the money funneled into the gun control movement. And I wish, and I wish this from the very beginning, that a small portion of that could be used to address the cause of that gun violence. And that is lack of social and emotional skills, literally. And if we could give that to every child, a small portion of the hundreds of millions of dollars that go into gun control every year, if we could take a portion of that and put it towards teaching kids social and emotional intelligence, we would reduce and prevent so much of suffering. And you know what, Jim? There are decades of research to back up what I'm saying. We know that kids that have these skills and tools taught to them in schools have less mental health issues, less violence and anger, less substance abuse, less incarceration, even less divorce rates, where I kind of sometimes jokingly say when I'm talking about it, see, I could have used it. But it's so important to think about the problem in a different way. When something that you've been doing and throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at isn't working and people continue to get killed, then let's look at it in a different way. And that is addressing the cause, because honestly, you can't be talking about a full solution unless you address the cause of the problem.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. It's such a deep and complex issue, you know, this issue of human violence, and both in terms of sources and instrumentalities. And the final question that comes to mind, you know, as you have experienced, you know, your life since Sandy Hook, as you look around you, around the United States, for example, do you feel that there's been any progress? Are we descending into a deeper morass? Because I know, for example, the pandemic has exacerbated all kinds of stress issues, not only in the United States where violence is up, domestic abuse, alcoholism, addiction, suicides, depressions, but that's a phenomenon that's literally worldwide. The result of the lockdown and the social distancing and the inability to kind of get beyond the pandemic has produced extraordinary stresses on everyone. And of course, you went through this in a very acute way 15, 20 years ago. But as you look around, your neighborhood in the world, are you more confident, or are you more concerned about these matters?
Well, I will tell you, one of the great things that came out of the pandemic is an increased focus by state and federal governments on the importance of social and emotional learning. When I started this movement about 8.5 years ago, I was traveling around and explaining what social and emotional learning is and how to implement it. And now through the pandemic, because of the, I call super pandemic of anxiety, as you said, we're realizing more and more that we have to focus on mental health. We can't just wait until mental illness arises and then focus on that, which is how we usually do. We have to address the cause of mental illness. And a lot of that is social and emotional intelligence in a lot of ways. And so there's this hugely increased focus on social and emotional learning and character development in schools. The federal and state governments are providing funds to teach educators and students these important skills. And someone mentioned parents. Parents have to be a part of the equation. Absolutely. As I said, I was a parent and I didn't have these skills and tools. And so you can't give what you don't have. So parents absolutely have to be included in this. That's why all of our programming has a parent part of it. And we have a full parent program so that everyone can be on the same page. But really, Jim, that's what I see as a positive that's come out of the pandemic, is this increased focus on social and emotional learning. So people can learn how to take their personal power back, to take responsibility for their lives, to take responsibility for their healing. And this can also reduce and prevent the suffering before it starts. Totally.
Well, hats off to you, Scarlett, and all the people that you're working with, and everyone who was involved in the Sandy Hook tragedy. That was a particularly painful scar on the conscience of America, and you lived through it. So thank you for joining us today. And Nadia, thank you once again for putting together such an extraordinary panel. Do you want to have any final words? Let's start with you, Scarlett. Any final comment that you would like to make, and then Nadia, and then we'll close out.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share the Choose Love movement with your group. Nadia, thank you for inviting me. I think that it's really important, and Jim, I know that you're trying to stress this as well, that we take responsibility for where we are. That means in our world, that means with our climate, that means with the violence that we see around us. I was one of those people pre-Sandy Hook shooting that would look at what's going on in the world and say, oof, gosh, it's really terrible, but that those things don't happen to me. It doesn't really impact me. What I can do is just go home and raise my 2 boys to be the best human beings that they can be. And that's where it ended for me. But then my son was murdered, And I had this realization that we are here to serve. We are here on this planet to learn from, grow through, and be strengthened by everything that happens to us in life, good and bad, and then to take that wisdom and use it to help others. And so the time has come. We can no longer sit back and wait for others to heal things, to solve things for us. We have to step up and do that. And I'll tell you that when you do that, it is incredibly healing for yourself, and you will find increasing joy in your life. You will find others, you will have incredible connections. Your connections will be deeper and stronger, and all of the nurturing, healing love you give out will be returned to you. I know that because that's what's happened to me. And so I just want to thank everybody that's listening. Thank you for choosing love and for helping to create a safer, more peaceful and loving world.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. You so embody what you're talking about, Scarlett. It's clear that you went through a total metamorphosis of your body, heart, and mind and soul through that experience, and it just radiates from you. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for your presence.
Thank you.
Nadia, any final comment?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much. This has been a really wonderful session. Thanks to Azim. Thanks so much to Scarlett. And thanks for all the work that you're still ongoing doing. I know you've got sessions, healing sessions with EFT, and all the skills program. I really recommend them to everybody. And I just want to say thanks to all the listeners who are here. And I hope that in some way, if you're on a path of grief, I hope that this has shown you that, it is possible to move forward and to move to a place of love, or, to live from a place of love, as Scarlett's been talking to us about. And thanks so much, Jim.
And Scarlett, did we put your nonprofit in the chat? Why don't you just say it again, that people can go to your website and donate or contribute?
Yeah, thank you so much. All of our programs are free. My son was priced out of the market of this type of learning in his school, as was Adam Lanza. And I live in a relatively nice area. It was an anathema to me that we couldn't afford essential life to teach our kids and our educators essential life skills. So I realized we need to make this available for all children, because this is a direct path to flourishing. So all of our programming is free on our website, Chooselovemovement.org. And so please visit, please register, please help spread our message so that more people can access. I know we're in 112 countries. And I've been all over the world speaking, and we're being taught now in prisons. We're being taught in foster care. We know that foster care needs to change. We're being taught in the foster care system, in governmental agencies, in governor's offices, in our judicial system, all over. It's a common language, bringing together, by the way, these previously siloed efforts. They're now speaking the same language, and that is the language of love. And love is what unites us. And we're all the same as human beings in the want and need to love and be loved. And when we don't have that love and connection, that's when things break down.
Well, just as an added notion, Ubiquity University is founded to teach life competencies, to teach the personal skills, the soft skills, what they call the 21st century future literacy, as the UNESCO calls it. And we're launching this global regeneration core, as I indicated at the beginning of the program. And I would like to maybe have another conversation with you, Scarlett, to see how we could start bringing some of your programming into what we're doing, as we're training what we're calling regeneration first responders in countries all over the world, and maybe include your content in the Ubiquity curriculum in some way, because you're absolutely right. You know, people know trigonometry, they know calculus, they know engineering, they know how to make money on Wall Street, they know a lot about how to make weapons, but none of our schools, almost anywhere in the world, teach us in a systematic way how to cultivate the virtues, how to become holistic, loving, healing, caring human beings. And one of our most popular courses, which is a required course for all students, in which we deliver through partnerships around the world, is what we call a foundation in soft skills, and the global and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. But it's really developing the interior of the human from the inside out, so that they can deal with the external world with a more holistic, abundant, compassionate framework. So would love to talk with you. I'll track you down. I have your email, and we can talk about how we could potentially collaborate. That'd be wonderful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd be honored.
Cool. All right, everyone. That's it for Humanity Rising today. Tomorrow, we're going to have Bob Rees back. He's going to be talking about how to live adaptively with a climate that is now spinning out of control. And so that'll be our session tomorrow. But Nadia, Scarlett, brilliant session, heartful session. We're deeply grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.